Hi, everyone, and welcome to reality. I'm Lev, and I'm here with William.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we're going to be talking about the top sci-fi movies of the new millennium. So, we have 5 different movies in mind, and we're going to go over each of them with you guys and why we think they're so foundational to sci-fi movies and going forward throughout the years. We're going to be telling you about why we think these movies have really shaped sci-fi in more recent years. So we're going to begin with The Matrix because of how much of an impact it's had on sci-fi movies. Like it's had countless impact or such a huge impact on so many movies since 1999. Really just about the notion of what if reality is a simulation? And that question has been around sci-fi ever since then. Anything you would add to that, William?
Yeah, I think that when we talk about Matrix being foundational, mostly we're talking about the cinematography of it because it was shot in a unique way. They had the bullet time cinematography where they could track the bullet as it was heading towards Neo. And it was just very slick and nice looking and had a lot of really cool action scenes in it, and it combined a lot of action elements and sci-fi elements, and it really created this sort of new idea of what a sci-fi movie should look like. And even if in terms of the plot or the theme, that may have not been original or too original, but even that was kind of mind-blowing, and how they integrated all the different philosophies and ideas together to combine this weird computerized world. So that's kind of what we mean, how it was a revolutionary foundational movie for the sci-fi genre.
I think you're pretty spot on your analysis of why the Matrix is important. I would just emphasize even more about the cinematics of it, the aesthetic of it being sci-fi. It wasn't just a matter of telling a story that used some science concepts that could be taken to a fantastical way, but really displaying it visually, what it means to be like in a different usage of science in a different sort of world in the future, the way we'd use science, and trying to take into account what would it mean if the world as we knew it was actually just robots controlling everything? What would it mean if we could, most of what reality is what we think is true rather than what is true? It gets really deep into the philosophy, all that along with that cinematography, not just what you show in the plot. It really integrates these ideas of philosophy, theme, and visuals into an integrated sort of artistic piece.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you would agree that the first one was much better than the second and third ones. I tend to think the first one is almost a standalone movie. And when I started watching 2 and 3, I felt like it was getting away from some of the themes in the first one. And what I thought had happened in the first one got all confused when I started watching 2 and 3. So I think that if you just look at Matrix 1 on its own, it doesn't really portray a serious confusion of what is reality. You ultimately get to the end where you know what is reality and what is the computer world. But then when you get to the second and third, the sequels, it gets all confused. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's maybe reflects the way the Wachowskis make movies. I think sometimes maybe they get too into these details that might not matter so much, but the kernel of their ideas, I think, can be very groundbreaking. I think that's really what The Matrix did. It wasn't so much the series or the franchise as much as it engaged the creativity of thousands of people. I mean, like before then, I didn't really even think of sci-fi as a thing. I was only 10 years old at the time, but it was curious and interesting to me. It probably influenced the way I think about sci-fi, and I know it has for many other people. And it's just reflects the changing idea of movies and technology and what art should be, I think.
I think it took the sci-fi genre to the level of drama, like philosophical drama, and
Mhm.
gave it a strong theme. So then you could start making really important sci-fi movies after The Matrix that dealt with like deep, real philosophical issues. Um, I think the prior sci-fi movies that tried to do that were mostly like space adventures or
Yeah,
related to like aliens coming to Earth or something like that. This one got rid of that like space travel stuff and focused on what what might actually happen to humanity um, in relation to creating robots. So it's kind of like Terminator in that aspect.
yeah,
I think Terminator was a decade or so before Matrix. Can't remember when it came out,
yeah, something like that.
but there is that element of the computers take or machines taking over the world, and so you get that in the Matrix as well. But what the Matrix does is it adds that layer of philosophy on top of it, whereas the Terminator was just this like action thriller sci-fi.
Yeah.
It didn't really have a strong philosophical message.
It started to resemble more the science fiction novels that have a message, have something to say about humanity and the meaning in life and all those sort of things. It started to resemble those sort of novels, whether it be by Asimov or Heinlein, these more deeper questions about life and purpose rather than these shoot 'em up sort of movies like Terminator. I mean, there wasn't much to Terminator other than there's a robot from the future trying to kill somebody. I mean, it's thrilling, but it's not deep, not at all deep. But the Matrix has all these deep about philosophy and like, what does your place in life mean if reality is, as we know it, is a simulation? What does it mean if everything really is, the truth really is hidden from you? You have to change your outlook on life. They're really deep questions there.
Matrix has an element of the Terminator and Agent Smith, but it's more than that. That's Agent Smith. The seek and destroy machine is just part of the like subplot almost. The main plot is Neo trying to figure out, what's going on in the world. So it's the grander plot is much deeper than just a kill mission from a machine.
This is similar to the next movie on our list, which is Ex Machina. And Ex Machina came out a while ago, within, I don't know how long ago exactly, maybe about 6 years ago or so. But it was about a guy who is testing a new AI creation, and just the premise is that he's testing whether it can fool people, whether she's human or not, whether this robot is human or not. And it's just really a look at that sort of question. Like, what does it mean for a robot to be sentient and aware? And Ex Machina is probably would, I bet it would shape sort of AI or robot movies in the future, because it was incorporating music really well, cinematography well, philosophical themes, even dialogue is done pretty well and believable. It's a really altogether well put together movie that assembles like all these things into a cohesive element, a cohesive piece of artwork.
Yeah, Ex Machina, in case people aren't aware of it or haven't seen it, has really just three main characters. They're all isolated in this retreat some billionaires retreat. He's this computer genius who's created the robot, and his name is his name is Nathan, and his employee who he invites to his house is named Caleb, and then the android is Ava. And really the whole movie is about them in this house where he's doing his where the boss Nathan is doing his research and creating the androids. And what I found fascinating about the story is that it kind of resembles a sort of Blade Runner type thing where you're trying to figure out who is what is the machine conscious, and you have this test to see if it's conscious, and they call it the Turing test, which I guess is an actual thing in reality. And in Ex Machina, it goes beyond that a little bit, and in regards to Nathan trying to figure out if Caleb can be fooled by his android. So it's like, even though the android is portrayed as an android, it doesn't have all of its flesh covering, so you can see its insides, but it's this attractive female robot. And so Caleb knows that he's looking at a robot, and Nathan wants to know, even with that perspective, will Caleb be fooled into thinking that it's conscious? So there's this question of who's testing who. Is Caleb being tested by Ava or by Nathan?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a mystery there, and you never really know until the end, like what Ava's doing. Like, is she conscious? What is her motive for acting? Does she care about Caleb? There's this whole interaction between their relationship, and whether Caleb has feelings for Ava and whether Ava has feelings for Caleb.
It goes into these questions deeper. It's not just the question of what makes a robot conscious, or can a robot be conscious? That's just the surface of the question. This is actually getting into the analysis of the question. It's putting you into a situation as a viewer. You have to really consider, how is this robot thinking? What are the motivations of the person who designed the robot? Is the person who designed the robot, does it actually have a bearing on how the robot behaves? And it gets at answering these questions in a very limited context. It limits the characters, it limits the environment in a way that we really focus on the questions of sentience and identity, without all these extra features of action just to entertain us, or comedy just, again, to entertain us. It's really focusing on the bare bones features of the story and of the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, and another thing it uses is the relationship between the mind and the body. So in a lot of Android movies, it just focuses on whether they're conscious or not. But in this one, it focuses on, do you need a body to be conscious? And the creator, Nathan, clearly is on the side of, yeah, you need a body. So he creates this very attractive female body for the android, because he thinks that in order to be conscious, you need to have this sort of sexuality to you. It's part of being a sentient entity.
Well, it could also make you wonder to what extent robots are just for the mere pleasure of humans, whether it's for our entertainment, whether Nathan made the robot attractive because it's what he wanted or what he thought consumers would want, as in the AI is an object of desire rather than an individual. So, I mean, that's another question. If the AI is sentient, does it have any individuality for real? Do we need to respect it? Does it exist for its own sake, or does it only exist for the sake of other humans? It can make you ask these questions, and it puts you in a context where you can analyze it, not just asking it, but seeing the implications. And that's what I think is really what makes it a a groundbreaking movie in that it, I would hope it shapes and influences sci-fi movies and from now and forever, actually.
Yeah, I think it'll have a big impact. Do you want to move on to Arrival?
Yeah, our next movie was uh, really taking maybe a similar idea about what does it mean to be sentient or an individual, but in the context of aliens. And Arrival really is a pretty simple story of aliens arrive on Earth and some scientists try to go into their spaceship and communicate with them. And it's that question of how do we know or recognize if something is intelligent? How do we recognize other things in the universe that are strange or unlike us? And to what extent we can are able to understand the strange and bizarre. What
Yeah,
was
this,
your takeaway point from Arrival, William?
in terms of the basics, I saw Arrival also as a movie about time, the perception of time, and language. And to me, that was the more fascinating aspect because um, I thought there were some issues with the whole gravitational aspect of the aliens. I didn't quite understand their strange view of gravity or their ability to seemingly defy gravity, which was weird. But I liked the story that involved their language and how they have this symbolic language that uh, doesn't can't you don't read it backward or forward. It's just this complete thing that when you learn it, it gives you a new perception of time. And I happen to like disagree with that view, but I think it's cool how they use that idea and incorporated it into the plot because as the main character who's played by Amy Adams, her character's name is Dr. Banks, and she's a linguist. She's brought there to understand the alien language on the ship. And as she learns it, she develops this new perception of time, and she can then see her whole lifespan and like understand everything that's going to happen to her. And in that way, it's a little deterministic. I thought the underlying metaphysics of it was determinism, but stylistically and thematically, they incorporated that totally like into the plot, and so you can appreciate it from an aesthetic viewpoint in how the movie was cleverly integrated with all of its themes.
As far as being a movie, I think you're right, really, that it integrated all its themes. It didn't have extra non-essentials that whatever message it wanted to convey, it focused on that message. That it was a limited area of context of where everything happened. There was a spaceship and the base where the scientists were coming from, and really it was an interaction between those two environments. We're focused on understanding these aliens and understanding our own place in the world and trying to understand the strange and bizarre, and trying to understand language, trying to understand how other beings might think, and even some scientific questions like, do our concepts determine the way we perceive reality? Do their concepts affect the way we think about reality? And it has those actual scientific questions, but placing them in a situation where these are taken to the test. And if they were real, what would it imply? What would it mean about life? Not just what scientific implications are there, but what does it do to our lives and how we think, and the deeper questions than just, oh, we found aliens. How cool.
I liked all of the artistic elements to it. I do have a criticism of it on a moral level because of the determinism. So in the movie, the character, Dr. Banks, learns that she's going to get married to her partner, her scientific partner, and they're going to have a child who's going to develop cancer and die, and her husband will leave her eventually because she doesn't reveal that information to him. And so I think that if we lived in a deterministic world and you knew what was going to happen to you throughout your lifetime, and you didn't tell your partner something like that, I think that would be a moral flaw, or at least, and a moral sin at most. So I have a problem with that aspect of it. I think it's portraying someone who's essentially resigned to their fate and keeping secrets from people. And I didn't really like that aspect of it.
I can see what you mean. Like, I mean, as far as the philosophy of a movie, I mean, there's things I didn't like either. I felt it not so much in the deterministic end, but that things were hard to understand, or rather that life itself is hard to understand. We can't know really anything about where it's going or why it's going a certain way. It's just time has happened and we're never quite sure what it will be, or never quite sure who we will be. And it just, I think, to me, is more that it's almost non-deterministic in the sense that there's only chaos in what you could actually understand. And the truth about things is some other plane of thinking that we don't even have access to. That's more my perspective on it. But again, yeah, I think you're right about thematically and incorporating its ideas. It did it very well. And I think that should shape sci-fi movies in the future too, because it's raising standards to be that we need to think about philosophy. We need to think about our place in the world. And any sci-fi movie needs to do that if it's worth anything, if it's worth the time and interest.
Yeah. One follow-up to your point about it being like a thought-provoking movie. I agree. I think that there were a lot of stylistic and plot elements to it that inspired that sort of view. The spaceship just lands like in this open field in Montana, and so it's just this wide expanse, and that's kind of like a setting, incorporating the setting with the theme of just thinking about things, in a broad way. And if that's a stretch, then you can also think of how the inside of the ship is this weird thing that is confusing with gravity, and they go through this long hallway to get to the communication chamber with the window, and it's everything about it in terms of its space and its the objects that are in there are just like crafted or molded to reflect just thinking about things and just sitting down and pondering.
I think that's a good place to move on to our next movie, which is Looper. Basically a movie about time travel, and imagine if your future self came back to today and you had to kill them. What would that mean? And how might that go down? I know you had a better opinion of the movie than me, William, right? In my personal opinion is that it was a bit shallow, a bit trite, and not very innovative. I would say I would pass on it generally as like a top movie, but I think it is one of the fewer time travel movies that aren't pure chaos, and I would rate terribly. I mean, as far as time travel movies go, it's not too bad. It captures the basic questions and the basic concerns, and just a movie about that. But I'm not sure if it got into things too much. It seemed to be incorporating too many other genres about horror and some non-sci-fi elements to make up for it, to pause in the plot. But what would you say about Looper, though, William?
Well, it's one of my favorite sci-fi movies from the last 20 years or so. I think it came out, I don't know, I think it was a few years ago. And it stars Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jeff Daniels. I like all those actors, so I really like the acting in it. And it's also written and directed by Ryan Johnson, who did Knives Out, which I also really liked. Ryan Johnson does complex integrated plots, thinking man's plots, where you have to kind of go over them with a fine tooth comb. And I think after you view this a few times, it'll grow on you, as it did with me. At first, you might think, oh, it's kind of violent or horrific. But they're a criminal organization. So the main character, Joe, is an assassin, and he's hired to kill people for this crime boss. And what they do is they send people from the future to the past so that there's no trace of them in the future, and so you can cleanly kill them in the past. So that aspect of it it portrays the main character as kind of like an anti-hero. He's sort of the assassin with a heart, kind of like kind of like The Professional or some movies like that.
Yeah.
And that aspect drew me in the beginning, because he was kind of like a good guy on the inside, but he was an assassin, so he's basically evil. But the time travel stuff I thought was done really well. It incorporated free will, and I haven't seen that done very well since maybe Back to the Future. And it's because of the attempt to change the future. And basically the main character, Joe, goes back into the past and tries to kill someone who he thinks is going to kill his wife in the future. So that was one of the good aspects of the time travel part. Of course, I don't really like time travel movies in general because I think they're just inherently flawed. It's just not a good concept to have in a sci-fi movie. But in this movie, they don't really get into like the nuts and bolts of how it works, and I'm fine with that. As long as there's this machine that takes you into the future or the past or whatever, and it's just used as a plot device, I'm okay with that, because then I like to see how they deal with the purpose and the implications of time travel.
Yeah, that makes me think as far as influencing sci-fi movies, it's hard to say if it has, because there are some things in Looper I see related to other things I've seen. I would argue maybe even some of these things come from before Looper in different science fiction books, but say that usage of a machine without really explaining what it does, other than that it makes time travel happen. I think that's something I've seen several times, that you take for granted how it works and you just assume that it does. And that's important storytelling wise, not to get into that. That one of the better things about Looper is that it doesn't get bogged down in the details of why it works or how it works. Any flaws would be about the degree they're analyzing these deeper concepts about changing the future, changing identity, and whether you're doomed to your future or not. Like, those are separate issues, but as far as technical aspects of the movie, I could see maybe it's had some influence. The movie doesn't have to be great for it to be influential. And I think that's the important point.
Yeah, in terms of influence, I'd say I hope that it inspires future sci-fi filmmakers to incorporate free will more into the narrative, kind of like how Back to the Future did. Especially if you're going to make a time travel movie. What I don't like about a lot of time travel movies is when they spend half the movie with the scientists and their chalkboards and their formulas trying to explain how it all works. I think that's just ridiculous half the time, because it's not going to work. And you're not really fooling anybody. It's not like there's this clear possibility of time travel in the future. It's always been a sci-fi gimmick. And like, who really believes in it? I don't know. I mean, I guess some people do and think it's possible, but to me, it's boring. So I prefer if the sci-fi movies just stick to a machine that sends you in time, and that's it, and You have some guy in a cloak who says it works, and that's fine. I'll accept it as a plot device. Did you want to add anything to that rant?
Well, no, but I think it's an important way to look at things that sometimes sci-fi can't really get into the details because it would bog you down on what the story is. Sometimes you can be skilled enough at writing that it doesn't feel like you're being bogged down in it, but that's more a skill thing than it is anything. As long as the focus for the viewer is on these themes, then the writer has done a good job, I think. I think that is related to the last movie on our list, Inception. And I'm sure many people have seen Inception, but just the idea of going into your dreams to retrieve information, then dreams within dreams. I think that's just a very compelling way of thinking about science fiction. That's science fiction about the mind and not just about like, oh, the nature of physics or something like that. It's more a modern way of thinking about sci-fi. It's like, what does it mean to be conscious? What does it mean to be an individual? The nature of our mind rather than just the nature of the world outside of our mind. And even the elements of going into your dreams, we take for granted how it works. We know that it does. We don't really know anything about the neurons or sleep cycles or anything. We don't know any of that. All we know is that you need to be asleep to go to your dreams, and from there you control them. There isn't much more to it as far as understanding how it works, which allows us as viewers to spend more time thinking about the themes rather than worrying about the technical aspects of why does it work or how does it work. A movie shouldn't be about science. It shouldn't be about that. Science should be a device or plot element, not a character on its own.
Yeah, unless you're telling an actual scientific story, then I could see going into the real science. But science fiction, there's a reason why there's fiction in there, because it's not real, and it's just loosely based on some scientific idea, you know. And I agree that Inception is another good example of using a scientific device and not spoiling it by trying to explain it. It's there's this device that creates these sharing the dream sequences and or events. It was created by the military. That's basically all you know about it. You know, it's just this device created by the military to share dreams. And so then you get into the plot and actions start taking place and it moves along and you get an actual story. And that is what's cool about it, is that it's got these different levels of the dreams, and it's got the limbo stage where you could just live forever in this fantasy world, and while in reality you're just sleeping for like 5 minutes. And it's got a simple concept for that you can understand, and then you can focus on understanding the plot, which itself is very confusing. So it helps that you don't have to worry about how the device works as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and one other thing to mention about it, I think it integrates different genres well. You could say it's a heist movie. You could say it's a thriller movie. You could say it's about a guy trying to find his way in life. I mean, it's many things in one, and it integrates them well. It's not like it's trying to be three things at once. It knows what it is and what it wants to say, and it's not using these elements just to capture your attention, but it's using it to tell a specific story, that it wants to say something, that it wants you to think about what does it mean to be in a dream versus be in reality. And even the questions of, if we were just only in a dream, what would that even mean? Would our life even have much meaning? Or what does it mean to evade reality in your dreams? There's even those kind of questions. And there's many different, it analyzes so many different ways of thinking about dreams. And it almost leaves almost no stone unturned. That gives you these questions. And not only does it give you the question, but it puts you in an environment where we were trying to look at the implications directly. What does it mean to our lives and perspective on our lives?
One of the big themes is, the Inception, the title of the movie, is putting an idea into someone's head that they otherwise would not have thought of or even agreed to. And that's what ends up killing his wife, the main character's wife, and it's what ends up driving the entire plot of the story. So I thought that was a fascinating integration between the plot and the theme. And I'm curious what you make of the end. I don't know if we can conclude this without talking about the ending and the spinning top.
Yeah.
Do you think that the top would have toppled, or do you think it would have kept going?
I like to think that it really would have kept going. My thinking on it is that it was a dream and he's still in a dream. And he was trying to escape the dream and he didn't really succeed, that he ended up evading the truth anyway. Unfortunately, I think there's different signs in the movie that he was dreaming and still is dreaming, that it was all about trying to get Cobb out of his dream, that he was trapped in his dream world to evade the truth of reality, and he never did leave it, unfortunately. And it's a very pessimistic way of looking at the movie, and it almost seems like an upbeat movie to begin with, but yeah, I think ultimately Cobb did not engage in reality and he's in a dream world.
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer. I've seen the movie several times now, and I like to think it would have toppled, but the way they ended it, you can't really be sure. So it's a tough question.
Yeah, and that would actually conclude our top movies. Actually, I can't even really think of other movies I'd even give us even honorable mention. Maybe Interstellar, but I'll just leave that as an honorable mention. There's nothing to say other than another Christopher Nolan movie, and I think he makes good movies and sci-fi and everything. So that's worth checking out if you like any of our recommendations here. Do you have any honorable mentions yourself?
Yeah, my honorable mention, I guess, would be Blade Runner 2049, just because it's kind of like an epic with a cool style to it that involves the search for identity, which is a theme that I'm really into in sci-fi, especially with like androids. So if you liked the first Blade Runner, you should check out the second one, the sequel, because it's almost as good, if not better. And I guess that we could wrap it up there if you want.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. That about wraps it up. Thanks, everyone. We'll have another episode for you soon.